It's 2 in the morning and you're lying in bed, replaying a conversation from 3 days ago. Something you said, the way someone looked at you. Did they mean it when they laughed? Or were they just being polite? And now you're thinking about all the other times you might have misread a situation, and suddenly you're constructing elaborate narratives about what people really think of you, and your heart is racing, and sleep feels like a distant memory. If this sounds familiar, welcome to the Overthinking Club. Population, way too many of us. And here's what nobody tells you about chronic overthinking. It's not a personality flaw. It's not you being dramatic or neurotic. It's actually your brain trying to solve a problem it thinks it can detect, but can't actually fix. So let's unfold what's really happening in the minds of people who can't stop overthinking, because understanding this might be the first step toward finding some peace. First, let's get clear on what overthinking actually is, because it's not the same as thinking deeply or being thoughtful or analytical. Overthinking is repetitive, unproductive thought that loops without resolution. It's when your brain gets stuck on a treadmill, running and running but never actually getting anywhere. Psychologists call this rumination, and it's one of the most exhausting mental patterns a person can experience. You're not thinking through a problem to find a solution. You're replaying scenarios, imagining worst-case outcomes, analyzing past conversations frame by frame, like you're reviewing security footage for evidence of a crime that may or may not have happened. And the cruelest part? Your brain genuinely believes it's helping you. It thinks that if it just processes this one more time, if it just considers every possible angle, you'll finally be safe from whatever threat it's trying to protect you from. But here's the thing. Most of what overthinkers obsess about falls into one of two categories: things that have already happened and can't be changed, or things that haven't happened yet and may never happen. You're either stuck in the past, trying to rewrite history in your mind, or you're living in a future that exists only as possibility. And in both cases, you're missing the present moment entirely. It's like your consciousness has become untethered from reality, floating somewhere between memory and imagination, and meanwhile life is happening right in front of you. So why does this happen? Why can't some brains just let things go? The answer is complicated, but it starts with something called negative bias. Your brain is evolutionarily wired to pay more attention to threats than to positive experiences. This made sense when humans were dodging predators and navigating genuinely dangerous environments. The ancestors who constantly scanned for danger, who replayed their mistakes to avoid repeating them, who anticipated every possible threat, those were the ones who survived. But now? Now we live in a world where the threats are mostly psychological and social, not physical. But your brain hasn't gotten the memo. It's still operating like every awkward conversation is a saber-toothed tiger, like every mistake is a life or death error, like every uncertain future outcome needs to be mapped and controlled right now. Overthinkers also tend to have something researchers call intolerance of uncertainty. You need to know how things will turn out. Ambiguity feels physically uncomfortable, almost painful. Not knowing what someone thinks of you, not knowing if you made the right decision, not knowing what's going to happen next week or next year. These unknowns create a kind of mental itch that you try to scratch by thinking. If you can just figure it out, if you can just predict it, if you can just prepare for every scenario, then maybe you'll feel okay. But the universe doesn't work that way. Life is inherently uncertain, and your brain's attempt to eliminate that uncertainty through overthinking is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. There's also a deep connection between overthinking and perfectionism. If you're someone who holds yourself to impossibly high standards, who believes that making mistakes or being judged negatively is unacceptable, then of course you're going to overthink everything. Every decision becomes monumental, because what if you choose wrong? Every interaction becomes a performance, because what if you don't come across perfectly? You're not just thinking, you're trying to control outcomes that were never fully in your control to begin with. And perfectionism is really just fear wearing a disguise. It's the fear of not being enough, of being rejected, of being exposed as somehow fundamentally flawed. So you overthink as a way to protect yourself from that fear, even though the overthinking itself becomes the thing that's causing you suffering. Here's something that might surprise you though. Overthinkers are often incredibly intelligent, creative, and empathetic people. That capacity to see multiple perspectives, to imagine different outcomes, to consider how your actions affect others, those are actually strengths. The problem isn't that you think deeply. The problem is that your thinking has lost its anchor. It's become recursive and self-referential. You're thinking about thinking, worrying about worrying, anxious about being anxious. And that's when the loop becomes pathological. It's like having a brilliant search engine in your brain, but instead of finding answers, it just keeps opening more tabs until your whole mental operating system crashes. And let's talk about the emotional component of this, because overthinking isn't just a cognitive issue, it's deeply emotional. Often, what you're really doing when you overthink is trying to process feelings you haven't fully allowed yourself to feel. Maybe you're afraid of being vulnerable, so instead of sitting with sadness or fear, you analyze it, you intellectualize it, you turn it into a puzzle to solve, rather than an emotion to experience. But emotions don't work like problems. They need to be felt, not figured out. When you bypass the feeling and go straight to the thinking, you create a backlog. The emotion doesn't go away, it just gets stuck in an endless thought loop, disguised as analysis. There's also a social dimension to chronic overthinking that doesn't get talked about enough. Many overthinkers grew up in environments where they had to be hypervigilant. Maybe you learned early on that you needed to read the room, to anticipate other people's moods, to stay one step ahead of conflict or criticism. Maybe emotional safety wasn't a given, so you developed this internal surveillance system to protect yourself. Over time, that system became automatic. You don't even realize you're doing it anymore, but your brain is constantly scanning for social threats, replaying interactions to make sure you didn't mess up, imagining future scenarios to prepare for every possible reaction. It's exhausting, and it's lonely, because when you're overthinking, you're not really connecting with people. You're too busy monitoring and analyzing the connection to actually experience it. But here's what I want you to understand. Overthinking isn't happening because you're broken or weak or doing something wrong. It's happening because your nervous system is trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows how. It learned, somewhere along the way, that thinking equals control, that if you can just figure everything out in your head, you can prevent bad things from happening. And maybe that strategy worked for a while. Maybe it helped you navigate difficult situations when you were younger, but now it's become a prison. You're so busy trying to prevent pain that you're creating a different kind of pain, the exhausting, relentless, suffocating pain of a mind that won't stop. So what do you do about it? How do you break the cycle? The first step is awareness, just noticing when you're overthinking without judgment. Not, oh God, there I go again, I'm so messed up, but, my brain is doing that thing where it loops. Interesting. The second step is recognizing that most of what you're overthinking about doesn't actually need to be solved right now. Your brain is treating a minor social interaction like it's a 5-alarm fire, and you can gently remind yourself that it's not. The third step, and this is the hardest one, is learning to tolerate discomfort, to sit with not knowing, to accept that you can't control how other people perceive you, that you can't prevent every possible negative outcome, that uncertainty is just part of being alive, and maybe, just maybe, that's okay. Because here's the truth that nobody tells overthinkers. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to predict every outcome, or analyze every interaction, or prepare for every scenario. Life is going to unfold however it's going to unfold, and your overthinking isn't going to change that. What it will change is your ability to be present, to connect, to actually experience your life instead of just thinking about it. And I know that's scary. I know the idea of letting go of control feels dangerous, but what if the real danger isn't in the uncertainty itself? What if the real danger is in missing your life because you are too busy trying to manage it in your head? So the next time you catch yourself spiraling, take a breath, notice where you are, feel your feet on the ground, look around the room, come back to your body, to this moment, to what's actually happening right now, instead of what might happen or what already happened. Your overthinking brain will protest. It'll tell you that you need to figure this out right now, that it's important, that you can't just let it go, but you can, you really can. And on the other side of that letting go is something you might have forgotten exists. Peace. Not perfect peace, not the absence of all thought or worry, but the kind of peace that comes from accepting that you're human, that you're doing your best, and that you don't have to carry the weight of controlling everything in your exhausted, beautiful, overthinking mind. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. What do you tend to overthink about most? And if you want to keep exploring the psychology behind everyday struggles, hit that subscribe button. Because understanding yourself isn't just interesting, it's the beginning of real freedom.